मुझे विश्वास है
Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. President Donald Trump is open to a trilateral summit in Alaska with Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. According to White House official, the White House is currently planning a bilateral meeting with Putin at his request first. Meanwhile, European leaders, including French President Emmanuel Macron, Italian Prime Minister Meloni, German Chancellor Merz, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, and others have urged active diplomacy, support for Ukraine, and pressure on Russia, praising US President Donald Trump's efforts to stop the war and vowing to maintain military, financial, and sanctions pressure on Russia. Gaza's civil defense has said that Israeli fire killed at least 37 people on Saturday, including 30 civilians waiting for aid, with incidents near a northern border crossing and central Gaza, leaving nearly 230 people wounded, while spokesperson Mahmoud Bassal also reported strikes and a drone attack near Khan Yunis. Tens of thousands have protested in Tel Aviv on Saturday against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's plan to expand the war in Gaza and seize Gaza City. Netanyahu's security cabinet approved the operation on Friday despite domestic backlash, military rumors of dissent, and international pressure. London police has arrested 466 people on Saturday for supporting the banned group Palestine Action, marking one of the largest mass arrests in the UK's capital. Rights groups, including Amnesty International, condemned the crackdown as a threat to free speech. Colombian conservative senator and 2026 presidential candidate Miguel Uribe, who's 39, is still in critical condition after suffering a new cerebral hemorrhage from a June assassination attempt in which he was shot twice in the head and once in the knee. 6 suspects, including a 15-year-old, have been arrested in relation to this attack so far. 4 astronauts, US Anne McClain and Nicole Ayers, Japan's Takuya Onishi, and Russia's Kirill Peskov have all returned safely to Earth after nearly 5 months on the ISS, splashing down off of California in a SpaceX Dragon capsule. According to NASA, their mission included experiments on plant growth, cell response to gravity, and microgravity's effects on human eyes. A court in N'Djamena, Chad, has sentenced former Prime Minister and opposition leader Success Masra to 20 years in prison and a fine of 1.5 million euros for hate speech, xenophobia, and inciting a May 14 massacre that left 42 people dead. Defense lawyers denounced the verdict as politically motivated and lacking evidence. US President Donald Trump is open to a trilateral summit in Alaska with Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. For now, the White House plans a bilateral meeting with Putin as requested by the Russian leader. European leaders are calling for increased pressure on Russia ahead of the summit, insisting that Ukraine's future must not be decided without Kyiv's involvement. A joint statement reaffirmed that meaningful negotiations can only happen in the context of a ceasefire or reduction of hostilities. The leaders promised continued diplomatic, military, and financial support to Ukraine, emphasizing that peace will require active diplomacy and pressure on Russia to end the war. President Trump's efforts to halt the killing and achieve lasting peace were welcomed. Ukrainian President Zelensky said recent talks with allies were constructive and insisted that Ukraine will not give up any land amid the confirmed US-Russia summit. Let's listen into what the Ukrainian president has said.
Активний дипломатичний день сьогодні і від ранку координація з партнерами – Британія, Франція, Фінляндія, Естонія, Данія, Іспанія. Дякую всім за чітку підтримку. Перше. Має бути чесне закінчення війни, і саме від Росії це залежить. Саме Росія має закінчити війну, яку вона почала.
Now for this discussion, we are joined by Professor Jim Rice. He's a professor of international law, joining us live from Beacon. Thank you, Professor, for joining us today. Good to see you. Now, how might European leaders' insistence on Kyiv's involvement shape the outcome of any proposed ceasefire or peace framework?
Well, it seems to me, I'll be very frank and I'll be very direct. It seems to me that this summit that has been hastily cobbled together and set for Friday this week in Alaska is a terrible idea. And it essentially rewards Vladimir Putin, who is a wanted war criminal, to have the status of stepping onto U.S. soil, meeting with a president of the United States. And, you know, if Putin gets his wish, deciding the future of Ukraine behind the back of the democratically elected leader of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky. I fully agree with the statement and the position of the European allies that, first of all, there can be no land sacrificed or given up for peace. It's never worked, and it is really not only not a just peace, but it is appeasement. And finally, Putin has not given up his maximalist demands. What Putin has said recently, that he doesn't believe that Ukraine exists. He wants to conquer all of Ukraine. He wants to eradicate Ukraine and make it part of what he considers to be ancient Russian empire.
And Professor Jim, do you think their European influence is strong enough to counterbalance this U.S.-Russia dynamics in this scenario?
That's a great question. Thanks for that. Well, what I think Trump is trying to do, what Trump and Putin are trying to do, is put Ukraine and put their democratically leader, Zelensky, in the position of being the obstruction to peace and ending the war. And I think what the Europeans can do is they can make vocal their right claim that this cannot be done. You cannot have a peace treaty or a peace settlement in the absence of a ceasefire, and you cannot have a peace treaty and peace settlement in the absence of direct participation in front of Putin. And it seems that Putin has made this a condition, that he's not going to be in the room with Zelensky. And it seems, and again, I'm not entirely sure because this is a moving story, but it seems that Trump wants to meet with Putin and then separately with Zelensky, and this is just not good enough.
Thank you, Professor, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you and we stay on this topic. Now, a drone crash in Russia's Saratov region has killed one person and injured several others. Officials say the drone hit the courtyard of a residential building. Residents were evacuated and a temporary shelter was set up at a local school. Medical teams are treating the injured. Authorities say another Ukrainian drone damaged an industrial site. Meanwhile, restrictions at Saratov airport were temporarily imposed and later lifted on the front lines. Russian forces have taken new positions in Srednoye and advanced near Zelenaya Dolina in the Donetsk People's Republic. Ukrainian troops launched attacks in the Sumy region, trying to surround Russian positions in Yunakovka and advancing towards Lokhnia. Clashes continue with Russian troops carrying out maneuver defense operations. Now we go back to our guest discussion with Professor Jim Rice. Thank you, Professor, for staying with us. Now, looking back at our previous discussion as well as this news, what are the implications of President Trump potentially excluding President Zelensky from the initial stages of this summit with President Putin?
Thanks for that. I'm glad I can reiterate my position. It's an absolutely appalling idea. It's unacceptable. It's dishonorable. and it should not be done. You can't expect to have a peace treaty, a peace settlement, and exclude the victim of an illegal invasion. It's simply unacceptable. The Europeans have to stand up. Right-thinking Americans must stand up, and people from all over the world should stand up against Trump and against this dishonorable proposal.
Yes, indeed. And what do you think? How did this American, like you criticize that it's allowed, Putin is allowed in American soil. How do you think they ended up being allowed in Alaska instead of earlier discussions that it could have been UAE or somewhere else in the world?
You're absolutely right. This is exactly what I had thought as well. I couldn't believe it actually when I learned that this summit was going to take place in Alaska. My guess actually is that you may think that I'm a little bit out of line here, but my guess is that Putin.
Thank you very much, Professor. Yeah, thank you very much, Professor, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. After an advisor to the Islamic Republic's supreme leader expressed opposition to the disarmament of its ally Hezbollah, Lebanon has slammed it as interference. Lebanon has said that it is flagrant and unacceptable interference. This comes as after International Affairs Advisor to Ali Khamenei has said that the Islamic Republic of Iran is certainly opposed to the disarmament of Hezbollah, as quoted by Tasnim news agency. Earlier this year, the Lebanese Foreign Ministry summoned the Iranian ambassador over critical remarks he made about the disarmament plans. Meanwhile, Iran's top diplomat Abbas Araghchi said that any decision on disarmament was Hezbollah's to make. He also said that Tehran is supporting its ally from afar, but no interference. The Lebanese government has cast disarmament as part of the implementation of the November ceasefire that sought to end the fighting between Israel and Hezbollah in their land. Now we go back to our guest discussion with Professor Jim Rice. Thank you, Professor, for staying with us throughout. Now, do you think it is realistic for Lebanon to achieve this regardless of Iran's response and Lebanon's response and Iran's opposition to disarm Hezbollah before December?
Well,
yeah.
Thank you. I wouldn't have said so before several months ago, but I think at this point Hezbollah is weakened to the extent that the Lebanese might be able to pull this off and to get them to disarm. I think, again, speaking from the point of view of international law, it's always unacceptable to have armed militias that are dictating policy.
Professor, we might have lost him as of now, but we are currently looking at Iran and Hezbollah's relations according to the latest news of disarmament. Now we move on to our next news. Russia's foreign ministry has condemned Israel's plan to take control of Gaza City. Russia has said that it has risked worsening the humanitarian crisis in the Gaza Strip. It has also said in the statement that it's a sign of humanitarian disaster. Russia's statement also says that the ministry warned that such actions would significantly complicate international efforts towards de-escalation in the conflict zone, leading to serious negative consequences for the entire Middle East. Meanwhile, thousands of people are protesting in Tel Aviv, opposing Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's plan to escalate the war. This comes after Israeli Prime Minister's office has said that the Security Cabinet have decided to seize the Gaza City while expanding its operations in Gaza. The Israeli government has faced sharp criticism in the country and abroad, including some of its closest European allies, over the announcement. Now we are joined by Scott Faulkner. He's in head of Eagle Enterprises. It's a security firm. Joins us live from Washington. Thank you, Scott, for joining us today. Good to see you. Now looking at how does Russia's condemnation of Israel's plan to seize Gaza City reflect its broader strategic interest in the Middle East?
Well, I mean, first of all, we shouldn't really care what Russia says. I mean, they're a bad actor. They're destroying Ukraine. They invaded Ukraine. They've done other horrible things under Putin. So the fact that they're criticizing anyone else is actually laughable. But in terms of, Russia is trying to find a role in the Middle East. When Assad was deposed in Syria, they lost a huge beachhead. They lost military bases. And so they're constantly trying to find new ways to be relevant in that region. So, but again, the West should not do anything other than ignore what Russia has to say, because the less Russia has to do with the Middle East, the better for the Middle East.
But do you think that this position by Russia is an attempt to strengthen its ties with Arab nations?
Well, again, they're casting about. I mean, you go back through the Cold War into the 1950s when Nasser took over in Egypt. There has been a Soviet or / Russia role in that region for many, many decades. And so Russia's trying to leverage those kind of relationships, and they're trying to get back on the chessboard, so to speak. And so it's but again, a lot of the major Arab powers in the region, I think they see that their future is with the West, not with Russia. And of course, you still have China trying to nose around in the region as well. So it's an interesting chessboard at the moment.
Yes, and Scott, now what are the potential international, legal, as well as diplomatic consequences for Israel following its decision to take control of Gaza? Despite growing global and internal criticism, how might this affect Israel's long-term alliances with Europe as well as US?
I think that Israel has to recognize that until Hamas is completely erased, not only off of Gaza, but off the face of the earth, there's always going to be a risk of another October massacre. So they are down to the last 25% of Gaza. They've got whatever is left of Hamas surrounded in that area. And I think it's the right thing to do in terms of until Gaza is completely cleansed of the terrorists, there's no future hope for Gaza. I mean, here's an area that has been fully independent of Israel and fully operational as a separate entity since 2003, and with all of the literally billions and billions of dollars of aid money coming in from even the US, the United Nations, and the West, instead of creating what could have been another Dubai or Abu Dhabi, they dug tunnels and trained terrorists with all that money, and went to the fanatics in Tehran to get further training and inspiration. I mean, these are horrible, horrible, vicious people, and if even one is left in the Gaza Strip, it's just going to grow back into a threat at some later point.
Thank you, Scott, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now we move on. The Venezuelan National Assembly has formally expressed its support for President Nicolas Maduro after the United States doubled its bounty on him to $50 million over federal drug trafficking charges. Assembly Speaker Jorge Rodriguez denounced the move as an absurd and desperate action by the U.S. Prosecutor's Office, calling it illegal, baseless, and a deranged attempt at aggression against Maduro and the Venezuelan people. He accused Washington of trying to encourage extremist groups to return to violence, saying such efforts have been and will continue to be defeated by the government and its supporters. Rodriguez stressed that the legitimately elected parliament stands firmly behind Maduro and is committed to defending what he called the sacred homeland. Let's see what Jorge Rodriguez, National Assembly Speaker, had to say.
Rechazamos las absurdas y desesperadas acciones anunciadas por la Fiscalía de Estados Unidos de América, a todas luces ilegales y sin ningún tipo de asidero real más allá del intento de agresión delirante contra el presidente constitucional de la República Bolivariana de Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro Moros, y contra nuestro pueblo rebelde y valiente. Estas operaciones no buscan otro propósito que nuevamente alentar a los grupos extremistas en el país y la región para que retomen la violencia, que ha sido derrotada y será derrotada y seguirá siendo derrotada en toda la línea por nuestro gobierno y nuestro pueblo. Este Parlamento, legítimamente electo y plural, respalda al presidente constitucional y le expresa nuestra convicción absoluta de acompañarlo en la defensa de nuestra patria sagrada.
Now we go back to our guest discussion with Scott Faulkner. He's the head of Eagle Enterprises, a security firm. Thank you, Scott, for staying with us. Now, for this news, can you give us a context about a little bit about why is this President Maduro being put on bounty like this?
Again, I mean, Maduro is probably the worst actor and leader in Latin America right now. I mean, he stole the last election. He's an oppressive dictator. People are fleeing his country. He's destroyed his country, which is saying something given how much his predecessor destroyed the country. So that being said, he's done things outside of the country. He is, the United States under Trump's first term declared him a narco terrorist, basically, because there have been massive drug busts and interceptions that are traced back not just to Venezuela, but to Maduro himself. And even one of Maduro's top people in the intelligence world, was basically arrested a number of years ago in Europe and pled guilty. And so a lot of roads and evidence points back to Maduro not just being a terrible person to his own country, but exporting horrible drugs that kill people to the region. And so I think what the United States is trying to do is, number one, try to draw attention to that and hopefully get more world criticism of Maduro. But secondly, I think there's still hope that there are people in Venezuela that would like to see a different government. And if you keep increasing the reward money, basically, that might inspire more people to step forward and oppose his government. Now, the parliament, again, is, yes, it's elected, but so is Maduro elected. So, it's just like the old Politburo in the Soviet Union. Just because another part of the ruling oligarchy is supporting the other part of the ruling oligarchy doesn't necessarily mean much.
And building on your answer, do you think this move further isolates Venezuela internationally or reinforce internal consolidation of power?
Well, again, certainly further drawing attention to not just that he's being horrible to his own people, but exporting deadly drugs to the region is going to further definitely isolate him in the international community. And hopefully, again, that at some point, I think the issue is trying to inspire opposition within Venezuela to topple him in some way, shape, or manner, hopefully, more peacefully than violently. But Maduro is pretty well consolidated in his power from his many years in office. So I don't think that drawing attention to how much America doesn't like Maduro and how much America would like to have him arrested is going to enhance his reputation to his people or help him leverage any additional power internally, but hopefully it will help isolate and maybe mobilize other forces against him externally.
Thank you very much, Scott, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now we stay in North America. President Donald Trump has nominated State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce as the next U.S. Deputy Representative to the United Nations. Bruce has served as spokesperson since Trump took office and was praised by the president for her work. Her appointment requires Senate confirmation, where Republicans hold a majority. According to a source, Bruce has defended Trump's foreign policy on issues from immigration to the wars in Ukraine and Gaza. She says she will advance America First values on the global stage. Bruce will serve under Trump's pick for UN ambassador, former National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. Waltz's confirmation is still pending after he was ousted in May over a controversy linked to U.S. military strikes in Yemen. Now we go back to our guest discussion with Scott Faulkner. Thank you, Scott, for staying with us. Now, what's your reaction about this news that Tammy Bruce is going to be representing U.S. in global stage?
Well, I've personally don't know her, but I've watched her for many years on Fox News. I mean, she's an incredibly articulate, knowledgeable, and very forceful and very effective communicator. And of course, when you look at United Nations ambassador, that's what you want. You want somebody who is going to get things on the record, someone who is going to say things in not only clear ways, but hopefully compelling ways to garner support in the international community for whatever is in the interest of the U.S., but also in the interest of general peace and well-being in the world. She started out as a Democrat, and that's another thing that, just like when we have Tulsi Gabbard and Robert Kennedy, that Trump is really showing more than really any other president in recent memory, this kind of bipartisanship of finding Democrats who have, may not be 100% in agreement with Trump on every issue, but on the issues that matter, he's put them in key spots to be as effective as they can be. So I think Ms. Bruce is going to be a very, very dynamic. I mean, you look back on someone like a Jeane Kirkpatrick under Reagan, who was also a Democrat at one time and then became probably one of our best UN ambassadors in history, that Tammy could basically follow in those footsteps.
And looking at this, how might her position influence U.S. relationships with allies who may have different views on global issues?
Well, again, this is where she, again, I only know her from her public persona and her persona as a commentator on Fox News, but seems to be a very articulate person, someone who seems personally very engaging. And as with any diplomatic setting, you want somebody who not only gets along with others, but makes friends, builds alliances, deepens relationships, and hopefully presents cases in such a way where people who may be in disagreement at least cede our position on it and don't as forcefully attack us or oppose us, and those that might be on the fence might be swayed to come over to our side, because again, the issues that kind of garner front page headlines in the United Nations are war and peace issues and major crises and famines and natural disasters, but the work of the UN ranges far further afield than that, including non-controversial, but still could be contentious issues such as fishing rights and law of the sea treaties and other things. So there's just a lot of things that a very effective, articulate, engaging, and personable UN ambassador could move, in essence, move things forward in very positive ways.
Yes. Thank you very much, Scott Faulkner, for joining us today and sharing your insight all the way from States. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring more news updates from around the world.